What do you do when the symbol of an entire lifetime of love is lying in a garbage bag like it never meant anything? That question hit me before I could even form the words. I'm 74 years old, and when I saw my wife's wedding dress folded, stained with dust, and pushed down into the trash bin behind our house, something inside me froze. Not anger, not even sadness at first. Just a cold, unfamiliar silence, like the ground beneath our 49 years of marriage had quietly shifted overnight. I stood there longer than I should have, holding the edge of the bin, asking myself if I was overreacting, or if my entire life had just tilted. Icebreaker or not, here's the truth. Marriage, love, secrets, betrayal, forgiveness, all of it lives inside ordinary objects. A ring, a photograph, and now this wedding dress in the trash. My first instinct was to pull it out. My second was to pretend I had never seen it. Instead, I did neither. I just remembered the day she wore it, her hands shaking, my heart racing, two young people promising forever without the faintest idea what forever actually demanded. Back then, the dress meant hope, beginnings, excitement. Today, in that bin, it looked like an ending. Why now? Why, after decades of building a life, raising children, surviving illnesses, funerals, and long nights when we barely spoke? My mind rushed through possibilities I didn't want to say aloud. Regret, resentment, a secret I had missed, a love that had changed shape while I wasn't paying attention. Marriage is strange like that. You can sleep next to someone for half a century and still discover they were carrying a story you never heard. The dress suddenly felt less like fabric and more like a message. I lifted it out slowly, dust rising like ghosts from the past. It smelled not of storage but of time, closets, moves, arguments, reconciliations, all the unspoken years. I wondered whether she had thrown it away in anger or in relief. Was this about us? Or about the girl she used to be? Had our wedding, our vows, our shared history become something she needed to discard to breathe? The thought frightened me more than I care to admit at this age. Inside the house, I could hear her moving about the kitchen, humming softly. How many times had we lived our lives like this, normal on the surface, earthquakes beneath? I realized then that this wasn't about a dress. It was about love in old age, about the secrets people keep to survive marriages that last a lifetime, about guilt and grief and the quiet betrayals that never made headlines in our family, but lived inside our hearts for years. I knew that whatever answer waited for me would not be simple or painless. If you've ever discovered something unexpected that forced you to rethink a relationship, you know how powerful moments like this can be. Stories about marriage, love, loss, secrets, forgiveness, and reconciliation aren't just drama. They help us understand our own lives a little better. So tell me in the comments what part of this story connected with you so far, or simply write, "I'm listening" if you'd rather stay anonymous. Your comment helps more people see this video, and it truly supports this channel. If you're finding value in reflecting on these long-life relationships and the confessions that come with age, please leave a like and subscribe. It lets me know that these conversations matter and encourages me to keep sharing real stories from a lifetime of marriage. I wish I could tell you that our nearly 5 decades together were a perfect love story, wrapped in golden light, but real marriage doesn't work that way. It's built from mornings that look exactly like the ones before them, from routines that slowly turn into rituals, and from words that should have been spoken but were swallowed instead. When I think back, I don't just see anniversaries and photographs. I see the ordinary evenings, the television humming in the background, the way she would fall asleep on the couch with a book on her chest, and the quiet between us that sometimes felt peaceful and sometimes felt like distance. We were young when we married, so young that love felt like a promise instead of a responsibility. Over the years, that promise was tested in ways we never imagined. We raised children, buried parents, argued about money, worried about health, and learned to live with each other's flaws. There were years of laughter, yes, but there were also seasons when we simply coexisted, moving around the same house like two planets with separate orbits. We told ourselves it was normal, that every long marriage settles into a rhythm. And maybe it does. But rhythm can turn into silence if you're not careful. There were moments when I saw sadness in her eyes and pretended not to notice. Moments when she asked if I was happy, and I answered too quickly. We learned to avoid certain subjects the way people avoid old injuries, with practiced caution. Looking back, I realize how many confessions were postponed in the name of peace. You think you have time to talk later. Later becomes years. Years become decades. And suddenly, you're 74, finding a wedding dress in the trash and realizing that later has run out of places to hide. Yet it would be unfair to say there wasn't love. There was deep, complicated love that survives not because it is perfect, but because it endures storms. We held each other through surgeries and funerals. We celebrated small victories no one else would remember. We forgave mistakes that were never fully spoken aloud. But love doesn't erase secrets. It sometimes helps people carry them longer. That's the truth nobody tells you when you say your vows. Marriage is not only about what you share. It's also about what you choose not to say, and what that silence eventually costs. As I sat across from her at breakfast in those days, watching the way her hands trembled slightly when she poured coffee, I started to wonder how much of her life I truly knew. Not the schedules, not the routines, the inner life, the hidden fears, the private griefs she never wanted to burden anyone with. The wedding dress in the trash was no accident. It was a message written in fabric and silence, and I finally understood that the story of our marriage was larger and heavier than I had allowed myself to see. How do you begin a conversation that might change the shape of your entire life? I stood in the doorway with the wedding dress folded over my arm, trying to match my voice to the softness of her humming. I didn't want to accuse, I didn't want to wound. I simply said her name, quietly, the way you do when you're afraid something fragile might break. She turned, saw the dress, and the humming stopped. Not dramatically, not with tears right away. It was the kind of silence that arrives when someone has run out of places to hide. She sat down before I asked a single question, as if she had been waiting for this. Moment longer than I had been dreading it. I asked why. Just that one word. Not, how could you? Not, what does this mean? Only, why? She touched the fabric like it belonged to someone else. For a second I thought she might laugh it off, call it a mistake, say she'd meant to donate it. Instead, her eyes filled and she shook her head. She said the dress didn't feel like a memory anymore. It felt like a weight. That was the first twist I didn't expect. I thought I'd hear anger about me. What I heard first was grief about herself, the young woman she had been, the life she thought she was entering, the parts of herself she had packed away along with that dress. She told me there were years when she felt invisible in our marriage and never said it out loud because she didn't want to become the problem. She confessed she had kept certain disappointments folded as neatly as the lace in that box, and over time they yellowed like old photographs. Another twist followed quietly. She wasn't only talking about us. She was talking about lost chances, about motherhood, about dreams she had set aside in the name of being practical. The dress wasn't just a symbol of our wedding. It had become a reminder of the version of her that was never allowed to fully exist. I listened, really listened the way I should have done years earlier. I didn't defend myself. I didn't list the good times as proof that everything was fine. We are taught to protect our pride. Old age teaches you that pride is a poor companion. She admitted there were moments when she had wondered what life might have been if she had chosen differently. That hurt, yes, but it was honest, and honesty, even late, is its own kind of love. The real shock wasn't her sadness. It was realizing how carefully we had both protected each other from the truth, thinking silence was kindness. She said throwing the dress away wasn't about erasing me. It was about saying goodbye to the girl who smiled for everyone but herself. That changed everything I thought I knew about the gesture. It wasn't an ending, it was a cry for a different kind of beginning, even at our age. I reached for her hand, not to close the conversation, but to keep it open. We were finally speaking the language we should have learned decades ago. She took a long breath before she spoke again, the kind you take before stepping into cold water. I could see it in her eyes. There was more. Not just sadness, not just nostalgia. Something heavier, shaped over decades and carried alone. Her voice was steady at first, then wavered the way an old photograph fades at the edges. She told me that on the day of our wedding, everyone thought they were witnessing the happiest moment of her life. But deep beneath the lace and the music, she had also felt fear, not of me, but of disappearing inside the role everyone expected her to play. She said the dress reminded her of the moment she promised herself she would never lose who she was, and how slowly she broke that promise. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. She admitted there had been a time, early in our marriage, when she thought about leaving, not because she didn't love me, but because she didn't recognize herself anymore. She stayed because of the children, because of duty, because of the past we'd already built, and because love, even when complicated, still lived between us. She didn't tell anyone, not even her closest friend. That secret grew quietly, like ivy between bricks, shaping everything while staying unseen. The dress, she said, was the last object tying her to that moment of choice. Throwing it away was not about destroying our story. It was about releasing the version of herself who believed she had no voice. She also confessed something softer and even more surprising. Over the years, she hadn't only felt trapped, she had also found new love inside our old marriage, a deeper one she never expected. It wasn't the fireworks of youth, it was the stubborn, wrinkled kind of love that survives ordinary days and silent mornings. That contradiction had haunted her, loving me deeply while grieving the parts of herself she'd sacrificed along the way. The wedding dress became a symbol where both truths lived together, affection and loss, loyalty and regret, gratitude and grief. As she spoke, I realized the story of our marriage had never been simple hero and villain, right and wrong. It was two imperfect people trying to hold on to each other while not losing themselves. All those years we avoided difficult conversations, thinking we were protecting our love. We were actually protecting our fear. And yet, there we were, in the quiet of our kitchen at 74, finally telling the truth like people who understood how little time there really is. She wiped her eyes, embarrassed by her tears, and whispered that the dress had felt like a cage she no longer wished to keep in the house. And for the first time, instead of feeling betrayed, I felt invited into a part of her life I had never been allowed to see. The discovery didn't break our story, it cracked it open. The question was no longer, why did you throw it away? But, who are we now that everything is on the table? That night I couldn't sleep. The house had that late-hour quiet where every clock sounds louder than usual and memories begin talking to you. I went to the attic, not looking for anything in particular, just following a feeling. There, inside an old tin box I hadn't opened in decades, I found the evidence of a life I only partly knew. Folded letters, a few photographs, ticket stubs, and a diary page with the corner torn. None of it was scandalous in the way movies teach you to expect. It was something more human and therefore heavier. It was the written record of a woman trying to hold herself together while being everything for everyone else. Some letters were to friends she never mailed. In them she wrote about loneliness, during years I thought were our happiest, about the way routine can feel like a locked room if no one asks how you're really doing. There was a photo of her standing by the ocean alone, younger, not smiling for the camera, but looking past it, as if asking the future a question it never answered. The twist that stopped me wasn't betrayal, it was realization. We had both been loyal, and still, somehow, she had been carrying sorrow right beside love, without telling me, believing silence was kindness. I saw my own reflection in those pages too. Times I chose work over listening, times I accepted I'm fine because it was easier than inviting tears to the table. The secrets she kept weren't weapons, they were survival strategies formed in an age when you were taught to endure, not to ask for change. I understood then how two people can share a bed, raise children, grow old together, and still miss entire chapters of each other's inner lives. That knowledge didn't accuse me. It asked something of me, to finally become curious about the parts of her story I'd never read. Forgiveness sounds simple when you're young. You think it means saying, "It's okay," and moving on. In old age, you learn the truth. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is learning how to hold love and pain in the same pair of hands without dropping either. The morning after those confessions, we sat at the kitchen table, like we had thousands of times, but nothing felt routine anymore. The air was lighter and heavier at once. We were two people who had finally spoken aloud the words we had tiptoed around for 40 years, and now we had to decide what to do with them. She apologized first, not for throwing the dress away, but for staying silent so long. Then I apologized too. Not because I had been a villain, but because I had too often accepted comfort instead of truth. That was the first twist. Realizing that guilt doesn't always come from great betrayals. It often grows from small neglects, repeated over many years. We had both been good people, yet we had both caused wounds we didn't recognize at the time. Love doesn't erase that. It simply asks, what will you do now that you finally see it? We talked like beginners, carefully, without trying to win. She admitted she feared dying with parts of herself unspoken. I admitted I feared losing her without ever knowing her completely. We laughed at how long it took us to speak honestly, and the laughter turned into tears that didn't feel like weakness. They felt like cleaning a room that had been closed for decades. The second twist arrived quietly. Neither of us wanted to rewrite the past. We wanted to live the present differently, even if our hands were wrinkled and our steps were slower. Reconciliation in old age isn't about starting over. It's about finally showing up fully for the life you already built. We began making small promises, the kind that matter more than grand speeches. To ask real questions, to answer honestly, to stop protecting each other with silence, to choose presence instead of assumption. There was no dramatic music, no perfect scene, just coffee going cold between us and two elderly people realizing that love is not a finished story. It is something you keep learning until the last page. The dress lay between us on the table, no longer a symbol we were afraid of, but an honest object, finally stripped of its silence. We didn't rush to decide its fate. At 74, you learn that important decisions deserve stillness. She smoothed the fabric with her hands, not tenderly, not cruelly, simply truthfully, as if acknowledging everything it had carried for almost half a century. For years, the dress had meant expectation, sacrifice, love, regret, duty, and dreams postponed. Now it waited quietly for whatever meaning we chose next. We talked about keeping it. That would be the easy choice, the familiar one. Fold it back into a box and place it in the attic, like nothing had happened. But we both knew that wasn't really keeping, that was returning to silence. We talked about burning it too, a symbolic ending, dramatic and clean. Yet something in us resisted that as well. The past didn't need to be destroyed. It needed to be understood. The twist snuck up on me as gently as a sunrise. This wasn't about a dress at all. It was about whether we believed that love in old age could evolve instead of merely endure. So we did something different. We didn't keep the dress, and we didn't burn it. We took a pair of scissors and cut a small piece of lace from it, not as a relic of pain, but as a reminder of truth. She placed that fragment in a small frame and set it on the mantel, not to worship the past, but to honor the journey we had finally dared to speak aloud. Then together, hand in hand like we once were at 25, we took the rest of the dress to a donation center. Somewhere someone else would turn it into something new. In that simple act, we rewrote what the dress meant to us. Not disappearance, not erasure, but release. Walking back to the car, she leaned into me the way she used to when the world felt too big. We laughed about how strange it is to start over when your hair is gray and your joints complain when you stand up too fast. But inside that laughter there was relief. Not because everything was magically fixed, but because nothing important was hiding anymore. We cannot change the decades behind us. We can, however, decide how to live the days we still have. So here we are, two elderly people who once believed their story was already written, discovering that even at this age, you can choose new meanings for old symbols. You can love again inside the same marriage, not naively but with your eyes open. You can forgive without forgetting, you can let go without destroying, and sometimes what changes everything isn't the secret itself. It's finally daring to speak it. If you stayed with me until the end of this story, thank you. It means these conversations about marriage, love, loss, secrets, forgiveness, and second chances matter to you as much as they matter to me. Growing older doesn't stop life from surprising us. It simply changes the shape of those surprises. If what I shared today made you think about your own relationships, about the things left unsaid, or about the courage it takes to begin again even late in life, I'm glad you're here. I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what this story made you feel, or simply write, "I'm here until the end," so I know you were with me all the way. Your words truly make a difference and help others who might need to read them. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps this community grow and keeps these real-life stories alive.